What I was saying was, I'm in Central Florida, and what I miss, one of the big things I miss being in Central Florida are the wonderful book sales that you have at the library there. I always came away with an armful of books, so I do miss those sales. Okay, we're here to talk about Alfred Hitchcock. This is going to be a presentation on his life, some of his films, some of the interesting aspects about him and his work. I will say right off the bat, I don't position myself as an Alfred Hitchcock expert. I'm a fan. I put together this presentation because I am a fan. And at the end, I'd love to get your input as to what you might know about Alfred Hitchcock, maybe which of his films is your favorite and why. We can talk about that afterwards. So let's get to the program. And there we go. Sir Alfred Hitchcock, as we know, was a revolutionary movie director, and I need to make one little modification here. There we go. Okay. He pioneered many of the techniques in the genres of suspense, like The Birds and North by Northwest and The Man Who Knew Too Much, and the psychological thriller like Vertigo and like Psycho. So we know him as I'm sure all grew up watching his movies, and we know him as a great movie maker. And as a result, we probably unconsciously take it for granted all of the milestone techniques he pioneered and the changes he brought to film, which is what we're going to talk about. Okay, so his work earned him, as we know, the title of the Master of Suspense. It's a great photograph. He made about 60 movies in his career, and we'll look at a list of those movies in a little while. 60 movies, and his career lasted about 50 years, from 1921 to 1976. He was born in 1899 in a suburb of London, the East End of London, and oddly enough, maybe eerily enough, only a decade or so earlier, before his birth, that was the stomping grounds for Jack the Ripper. So maybe there was something in the air when Alfred Hitchcock was born. All right, so he's a half English, half Irish ancestry, and he became world famous in the mid to late 20th century, but not a lot is known about his younger years. And a few years ago, a photo album surfaced, a photo album showing pictures of him in his younger years. And this was in 2014 when it was found. And a rare photograph shows the future director playing tennis in a dress. In a dress. Apparently, he was known to show up at parties wearing a dress. I don't have an explanation for it. I don't know if he did. But in fact, this was known. And when North by Northwest debuted, people suspected that he had put on a dress once again. Looking at this scene, this particular person sitting in one of the frames was suspected by some to be Alfred Hitchcock, but no, it was Jessalyn Fax, an actress who happened to have a strong resemblance to Alfred Hitchcock. He had two siblings, but he described his childhood as lonely and sheltered, probably due in part to the insecurity he had about his obesity. He had a strict parental upbringing. His father sent him to a police station to make a point, sent him to a police station with a note asking an officer to lock him up as punishment. He was locked up for about 5 or 10 minutes in prison, and that left a psychological scar in terms of a sense of claustrophobia and that sense of being wrongly accused and wrongly treated, which surfaces as a motif in many of his films. He also remarked that he had an indulgent mother. She would force him to stand at the foot of her bed for hours at a time, and then console him with food, which he blames in part for his conspicuous belly. He blamed relevant experiences, his closeness to his mother. We'll see. All right, Alfred Hitchcock attended St. Ignatius College, a Jesuit school, where he studied engineering. And then after that, he attended the University of London, where he began taking art courses. He began making a turn in the direction of where he ultimately ended up as an artist. His interest in movie began when he was 16. And he began by going to the movies frequently and reading the magazines, the movie magazines, like Photoplay with Mary Pickford on it, or Film Fun with Charlie Chaplin, a motion picture with Rudolph Valentino. This was his self-education in movies by reading these publications. In 1920, he got a job as a designer of title cards. Those are the film frames that show the dialogue in silent films. It's funny, we talk about silent films, but when those films were being made, they were not referred to as silent films, they were referred to as films. It was only until sound came along that we looked back and referred to the earlier films as silent films. So he began by designing these title cards, using his artistic education to help him out with that. And he did a little bit of everything. He did some art direction. Art direction is when you're responsible for the sets and the props and the locations. Some art direction, some co-script writing, some film editing, and some assistant directing. So in essence, he was putting together his own film education on the job. In 1923, he got his first chance to direct when the director of a film became ill and was unable to finish the film, and Hitchcock completed it. And there you see him before a crank camera. That's how far back that is. The film was a 20-minute comedy entitled Always Tell Your Wife. He did not get director credit. The original director got the director credit, as you can see, by Seymour Hicks. But it impressed the studios significantly enough that he was given a chance to direct his own film. And the first film he directed was a film called The Pleasure Garden in 1925. It was a silent film about two London girls, chorus girls, and their troubled relationships. And he got his directing credit finally there at the bottom. You can see the arrow. I'm going to try something here. Hopefully I don't spoil anything. Okay, can you see I hope you can see the red circle there, the arrow.
We can.
Good, thank you. Okay, in 1926, this was a pivotal moment for Alfred Hitchcock. This was his first major project that was truly his. And it was a movie called The Lodger, about a man who was wrongly suspected of being Jack the Ripper. And remember, Jack the Ripper had haunted his childhood neighborhood 10 years before he was born. And Hitchcock, that movie launched him on the thematic elements of suspense and mystery that were part of his movie making throughout his career. Hitchcock said, "The Lodger was the first time I'd exercised any style, which was unusual. In those days, directors," and we'll get this again in a little while, in those days, directors were basically part of a team of people who made films. Today, directors are the total control over a film. But back in those days, the director was a little more important than the cameraman, the costumer, etc. So by exercising some style, he was beginning a new trend in directing. And also in that same year, 1926, he married his assistant director and his creative partner for his entire career, Alma Revel. He and Alma had a daughter, Patricia, and she did some acting. She appeared in several of her dad's films and TV episodes, including in 1951 thriller Strangers on the Train. You can see the arrow pointing to her. This is the Leo G. Carroll. Leo G. Carroll is on the right there. 1929, Hitchcock directed Britain's first talking picture. So there was many milestones in his career, and it was Blackmail. It was the title, and it was about a London woman who was blackmailed after she killed a man who tried to rape her. It starred Annie Andra. Annie Andra happened to be the wife of the great German boxer Max Schmeling, who had a couple of very famous bouts with Joe Louis. And so in this next frame, we're going to see her doing a screen test. Annie Andra doing a screen test with Alfred Hitchcock. You might have to turn your volume up because it's a little low.
Miss Andra, you asked me to let you hear your voice on the talking picture.
But Hitch, you mustn't do that.
Why not?
Well, because I can speak well.
Do you realize the squad van will be here any moment?
No, really. Oh, my God, I'm terribly frightened.
Why? Have you been a bad woman or something?
Well, not just bad, but...
But you slept with men.
Oh, no!
You have not come here. Stand in your place, otherwise it will not come out right, as the girl said to the soldier. That's enough.
So that was a screen test and a little bit racy on the part of Alfred Hitchcock. And that'll come up a little bit later in our presentation. All right, after a series of successful mystery and suspense films in Great Britain in the 30s, and he made some notable ones, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, he came to Hollywood. He came to Hollywood where he was given the creative freedom to pioneer a lot of the techniques of suspense and psychological thriller genres. Hitchcock is arguably the most widely known and influential director in the history of movies. Today, you could conceivably make the argument that Steven Spielberg might be bucking for that particular crown. Steven Spielberg, of course, has made many great movies. Initially in Spielberg's career, he was seen as a fine director of family films, but then he did a number of adult films with adult themes like Schindler's List, which really put him in everybody's mind in the category of Alfred Hitchcock. Okay, 1955, he came to the United States and became a citizen, or I should say he was already in the United States. He became a citizen in 1955. He became well known through his films, his weekly TV shows, which often reflected a really bizarre sense of humor. And this particular image probably is the meaning of overkill, I would say. And then another image of him, a good time to give up smoking. He's tied to a pole with a bunch of wood. Not a good time to light a cigarette. So 1979, the year before he died, he was honored by the American Film Institute with its Lifetime Achievement Award. Let's take a little look at the video there.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is only one master of suspense. From the American Film Institute, Hitch, with our great respect.
May it please Ambassador J, Queen Ingrid, Director Stevens, and my co-conspirators in this bizarre trade of making films. It has been my observation that man does not live by murder alone. He needs affection, approval, encouragement, and occasionally a hearty meal. Tonight you have provided me with 3. Well, out of 4. Anxiety strangled my appetite. This demonstration of your approval and affection has encouraged me. I will go on.
Unfortunately, he didn't go on. He died a year later. In that same year, by the way, 1979, is when he was knighted, when he became Sir Alfred Hitchcock, and he died in 1980 in his sleep in Bel Air, California, and he was survived by Alma, his artistic partner all his life, and she died a few years later in 1982. All right, so let's take a look. Let's take a quick look at some of the better known and important films made by Alfred Hitchcock. The ones in the 30s were made in Great Britain, and the ones after that were made in the United States. And The Man Who Knew Too Much was made in 1934. It stars Peter Lorre. Peter Lorre was of Hungarian Jewish descent. He was living in Germany. He was living and acting in Germany when the Nazis rose to power, and he left Germany and went to England and began making movies there. The Man Who Knew Too Much, this movie was either his first or second, there's some disagreement about that, his first or second English language movie. The Man Who Knew Too Much It was considered the first 100% Hitchcock film with the stereotypical Hitchcock suspense and mystery and thrills. The first movie he directed in which he had total control over content and style. And again, this was a new trend. We'll talk about that in a little while. A new trend for directors to have total control over what's in the film. Francois Truffaut, the great French director and critic and movie writer, conducted an interview, a week-long interview with Alfred Hitchcock in 1962, which became the basis for a book, which you might find at the Finkelstein Library sale. It's called Hitchcock Truffaut, and it's basically based on this 2-week interview they had together. And Truffaut asked, "This type of cinema," he said to Alfred Hitchcock, "though popular with audiences, sometimes irritates critics because of your casual approach to plausibility," meaning logic and plausibility, and would this really happen? A great example of what Truffaut was talking about was the scene in North by Northwest when the character Roger Thornhill is being chased and shot at by a biplane with a machine gun mounted on a biplane. Now, we probably all have seen that film. We know that just prior to this, Roger Thornhill is standing at a crossroads in the middle of nowhere, and it would have been very easy for a car to pull up, shoot him, and take off. That would have been the easy way, the logical way to do it. But Alfred Hitchcock came up with the idea of the biplane, and it's dramatic and it's exciting, and you get to see Cary Grant running for his life. But the question of plausibility does arise. And Alfred Hitchcock once said something to the effect that he didn't care whether on the way home in the car you began to say, "Wait a minute, why would they use a biplane?" He didn't care if you did that. He just wanted to have your attention, give you an exciting ride for 2 hours, and later on, if you had some questions about the logic or plausibility of some of the actions of the characters, that was not his concern. He just wanted to show you a good time, and of course, he made many movies that showed us all a good time. Francois Truffaut, to his question, Alfred Hitchcock answered, "I have a favorite little saying, logic is dull." So he just wasn't all that concerned with logic or plausibility. We'll get to it in a second. 39 Steps, 1935, was another milestone movie that he filmed. It's about a man wrongly accused of murder, caught up in preventing an organization of spies from stealing British military secrets. And so you have a man who's accused of murder and has to solve this mystery in order to exonerate himself. That's basically what the 39 Steps are about. It's also an example of a genre that Hitchcock is said to have invented, the romantic thriller. This was the first movie that combined a thriller film and romance. And it's somewhat understandable since the two principal stars, Robert Donat and Madeleine Carroll, spend a lot of the movie handcuffed together. So there had to be some romance as a result. It's an image of Alfred Hitchcock directing. And you may see Alma, his wife, on the right with the script. Hitchcock didn't write his scripts, by the way. We refer to his movies Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest, but he did not write those scripts. He used veteran, experienced, well-trained scriptwriters, but he did exercise control over those scripts. He would demand rewrites. He would change whatever it is that he wasn't happy with in the script. There are two different traditions in script writing, very quickly. And I'm a playwright. As a playwright, when I write a play, I own that play and it's mine forever. If a theater wants to do my play, they essentially lease it from me. Movies are different. A scriptwriter writes a script and he outright sells that script. You sell the script. If I'm a scriptwriter, I write a script, I'm hoping some studio, some director is going to buy it. And you sell that script, and therefore that script is not a property of the director, producer, whomever it was who bought it, and they can do anything they want with it. Change the title, change the story, change the location, change the sex from the main character from a woman to a man, or vice versa. That's the tradition in movies. A director is generally able to do anything with the script that he thinks or she thinks is going to make that script work better. So he didn't write his scripts, but he exercised a lot of control working with his writers in shaping the scripts. And one of the things to remember about movies versus theater is that movies are a visual medium. Movies are a visual medium. So the choice of, for instance, I just put myself in a corner here. I think it's either Saboteur or Sabotage ends up with people crawling over the face of the Statue of Liberty. Why? Because it's a very visual scene. That's what Alfred Hitchcock looked for in movies. He is considered today as a director as auteur being French for author. And though that theory emerged with Francois Truffaut and others in France, it certainly applied to Alfred Hitchcock, director as author of the film. Even though he didn't write the script, directors are considered the author of films. Stanley Kubrick said, "One man writes a novel, one man writes a symphony. It is essential for one man to make a film, to have that vision, to coordinate, to bring all the pieces together, to have that roadmap." And so directors have in today's movies, directors are the most powerful influence, and they have total control of what goes into a movie. Lifeboat, 1943. It's about passengers in the Atlantic. Their ocean liner has been sunk by a German U-boat, and there's about 8 or 9 folks trapped. The boat is at capacity. 8 or 9 people trapped in that boat, including a German sailor whom they are not particularly thrilled to have on board that lifeboat. This movie was so well received that Hitchcock received a nomination for Best Director of the film. It stars Tallulah Bankhead. Let's see if I can do that. I think this is, I lost my little red thing. Let me try that again. Here, let's see. Yeah, Tallulah Bankhead. William Bendix is over here. Hume Cronin is, where are you? Hume is up here. And just a stellar cast of people stuck in a lifeboat. And this is an image of the closing party. The film is in the can, as they say. Alfred Hitchcock blowing out candles, and here's his daughter Patricia, Tallulah Bankhead, Hume Cronin. Another of his great movies, Spellbound, starring Gregory Peck and Ingrid Bergman. And this is about a doctor at a Vermont hospital who's arrived to replace the outgoing director of the hospital. And little by little, the character, our psychoanalyst played by Ingrid Bergman, begins to suspect that he is not who he says he is. And that's the kernel of the mystery, of the suspense. Who is he? Why is he there? And what secret does he have? Notorious, another of his suspense movies, starring Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman and Claude Rains, the great Claude Rains, and so many important movies he appeared. It's about a woman, an American woman, who was asked by the American authorities to report on this Nazi ring. I believe it was a Nazi ring that is in which the Claude Rains character participates. And the question then becomes, in this film of Notorious, how far will she go to ingratiate herself to him? Obviously, the connotations are sexual. And here's a shot of Hitchcock meeting with his cast. Reviewing proposed costumes. As I said a moment ago, the director is the author of the film, which means he has total control, total approval of everything. Lighting, sound, costumes. And here he's reviewing a costume with, you can barely see her on the left, that's Edith Head. And she was an Academy, for many years, an Academy Award-winning costume designer. So the director has total approval of everything that goes into the film because it's his vision. It's his vision. It has to fit in with what he, or if it's a woman, what she, how she sees the film in her head. I confess, this is a really delicious film with Montgomery Clift and Ann Baxter, and it's about a priest who hears a confession of a murderer. And he himself, the priest, becomes accused of that murder, and he cannot say what he knows because of what's called the seal of the confessional. In the Catholic tradition, a priest cannot reveal anything that he has heard in confession. So he knows who the killer is, and in fact, I think the killer blackmails him or something. It's a while since I've seen it. But he here you have a man in a situation who knows who the guilty party is, but he can't reveal it. That's the crux of the issue, and I Confess. And here's a shot of the filming of I Confess, Ann Baxter and Montgomery Clift in the rain, and Alfred Hitchcock very comfortably ensconced under an umbrella. North by Northwest. This is one of my two favorites, maybe my second favorite of the Alfred Hitchcock films. And the working title of this film, by the way, rather the original title that this film was going to come under was In a Northwesterly Direction. With a mouthful, right? That was the original idea for the title, In a Northwesterly Direction. And the movie was set to climax in Alaska. I don't know what circumstances or what the scene was going to be, but this character Thornhill was going to end up somehow in Alaska in search of solving his problem. Maybe that's where the spies he's chasing were based. But it was changed. Alfred Hitchcock, as directors are able to do, changed the climactic moment from Alaska to the north, the monument in North Dakota. I've just gone blank on the name of it. And why? Because it's such a visual. It's such a visual scene, having those actors, both in this done in the studio, of course, climbing over the face of Mount Rushmore. So it was originally going to be in a northwesterly direction. So it just doesn't catch, whereas North by Northwest does. And it was intended to end up in Alaska, but it didn't. It stars James Mason, Eva Marie Saint, and Cary Grant. James Mason, just another great actor. Psycho, maybe his best known film, Psycho, 1960. It spawned a whole generation of women afraid to take showers as a result.
Here we have a quiet little motel, when in fact it has now become known as the scene of the crime.
You have a vacancy?
Oh, we have 12 vacancies.
You know, this is the first place that looks like it's hiding from the world.
I think that we're all in our private traps, clamped in them. And none of us can ever get out.
Is anyone at home?
Oh, that must be my mother.
Is anything wrong?
Am I acting as if there's something wrong?
She's not missing so much as she's run away.
Put me down. Mother! Oh, God! Mother!
What are you running away from?
She looked like a wrong one to you?
It's not as if she were a maniac. She just goes a little mad sometimes.
I'll stop it there. It goes on for a little longer, but that Psycho, I'm sure you've all seen it, maybe only once, because it is a difficult film to sit through, particularly the shower scene. I remember when I saw it as a young man at the Lowe's American, I think it was, in the Bronx. This sign was posted in the lobby, and you might remember that too if you saw it in this first run. It is required that you see Psycho from the beginning. You were not permitted to go. In those days, you might recall, if you wanted to go see a movie, you'd walk into the theater at any time. You might walk into the theater halfway through the film and watch the second feature and the cartoons and the coming attractions and the newsreel, and then watch the beginning of the film that you walked into halfway through. Well, in this particular case, audiences were not permitted to do that. You had to see the movie from the beginning, and of course, it makes sense in two ways. It makes sense in that the murder of the Janet Leigh character happens early, and secondly, it builds up such publicity. What is it that we can't that we'd miss if we come in late? It was brilliant marketing ploy. And here's Alfred Hitchcock with some wardrobe advice. He had an eye for the ladies, and that was no secret. All right. Some of his best-known films also include The Birds, 1963. This is a little atypical. This is more of a horror film, more of a monster kind of horror film, monster being the birds turning on human beings, than a mystery or suspense. But it was very successful.
Oh, now why would he do that? Most peculiar.
There's no reason to be afraid.
Birds are not aggressive creatures, miss. They bring beauty into the world.
That might be true for one bird, but thousands of birds? That's a different story.
I hardly think a few birds are going to bring about the end of the world.
I think you're the cause of all this. I think you're evil!
One of the most terrifying films of all time.
Let's stop that. The Birds. It starred Tippi Hedren and Rod Taylor. Both Tippi Hedren, I believe this was a breakthrough film. Rod Taylor, of course, was already established. Actor Hitchcock coaching one of his actors in The Birds. What is my motivation? All right, it's my little joke. Some of Hitchcock's best films also include Rear Window, 1954. There's a streak of voyeurism in some of his movies. You'll recall in Psycho, the Psycho character, I can't think of the character's name, peeks through a hole in the wall watching the Janet Leigh character change her clothing. And this movie is totally about voyeurism. There's a man who's laid up with a broken leg in his apartment. He's a photographer, and he spends his time, he can't go anywhere, spends his time observing his neighbors through his rear window into the courtyard, watching people in their rear windows. And as you know, he eventually, comes to the conclusion that one of his neighbors has murdered his wife, the neighbor played by Raymond Burr, who you probably know better as the old Perry Mason. And here it is, the threat of voyeurism. This idea of voyeurism is common in a lot of Alfred Hitchcock's films, from Psycho, as you can see here, from Rear Window, and we'll see another one in a little while. Alfred Hitchcock framing a Rear Window shot. This is Grace Kelly. Now, you may wonder, directors don't really do it anymore necessarily, but you may wonder why a director would do that. And basically what a director is doing is creating a frame. And by doing this, he can imagine what the camera will be able to see in that frame, what exactly will be in the frame. That's the idea of doing that. All right. Alfred Hitchcock stories, there are a number of themes in common elements in many of his films. And one of them involves ordinary people who by some accident or forces unknown to them, some trick of fate, find themselves in a desperate situation, in over their heads, often a life and death situation, trying both to save their lives and try to figure out at the same time what's going on. And that, of course, is the basic plot of The Man Who Knew Too Much. The situation there, as you recall, is he hears from a dying man a warning that there's going to be an assassination plot. And now he knows too much. Now the James Stewart character knows too much, and his son, the son of he and the D'Orsay character, is kidnapped in order to keep him silent. The Man Who Knew Too Much, 1956. And this is the when he hears the secret that he's not supposed to know. And of course, you know, if you've seen the film, you know that Doris Day gets to sing "Que Sera Sera," which became a hit solo song. And here's Alfred Hitchcock, a hands-on director. I'm not quite sure what he was doing, maybe massaging her ankles. And she's got a knife in her hand, so I would be a little careful if I were her. The Man Who Knew Too Much, a remake. The Jimmy Stewart version is a remake of the 1930s A Man Who Knew Too Much, with starring Peter Lorre. Same title, same basic idea. So why would a film director remake a film he's already made? Alfred Hitchcock said, let's say the first version of the work is the work of a talented amateur, meaning the original Man Who Knew Too Much, and the second was made by a professional. what he's trying to say is that being a more experienced director, knowledgeable director, skilled director, he could make the movie in a way that was superior to the way he made it the first time. Vertigo, this is my favorite. Vertigo is my favorite of the Alfred Hitchcock films. It's just so rich. It's rich in psychology. It's almost 3 different films. You have the film of Scotty, the police officer played by James Stewart, who's hired to follow the Kim Novak character, and that's one. And then you have a second part where he's dealing with PTS, post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm trying not to tell too much about the film in case you haven't seen it in a while. And then the third is the solution of a mystery. So it's almost like 3 different films, and it's psychologically rich, psychologically sound. A man who's seen something awful goes into a psychological meltdown. 1958.
Vertigo, a feeling of dizziness, a swimming in the head. Figuratively, a state in which all things seem to be engulfed in a whirlpool of terror, as created by Alfred Hitchcock in the story that gives new meaning to the word suspense.
I don't want to die. There's someone inside me, and she says I must die. Scotty, don't let me go.
A beautiful girl haunted by the desperate, unexplainable urge to destroy herself. A man possessed by the paralyzing vertigo that made him afraid of high places.
Easy now.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Well, this is a cinch. Here, I look up. I look down. I look up. I look...
Notice the music. The music is brilliant.
What was the strange attraction that brought these two together in spite of the dark forces that tore them apart? The specter from the past that drew her to the ancient headstone in the mission graveyard. The compulsion that drove her relentlessly to the point of no return. The story of a love so powerful it broke down all barriers between past and present, between life and death, between the golden girl in the dark tower and the tawdry redhead that he tried to remake in her image.
If I let you change me, will that do it? If I do what you tell me...
Kim Novak was outstanding in this film. Probably the best thing she ever did. Tawdry redhead, I think it's a little bit extreme. I didn't see her as tawdry, but maybe I'm being defensive. My wife says I have a crush on her. In Vertigo, there's another instance of voyeurism. We talked about voyeurism in some of his films. Here, very, very clearly, Scotty, the former police detective, is keeping an eye on Madeline. It's the character's name, Madeline, and it's a very clever shot. We see what he's looking at because we're looking at Madeline's reflection in a mirror. So we get to see both the eye of Scotty peeking through the open doorway, and we get to see what he's looking at because we see the reflection in the movie. These are the kinds of creative things that directors can do to really make their films pop. So Vertigo, is basically a story of a retired cop hanging out in San Francisco. James Stewart, and in a bizarre love triangle with Kim Novak and Kim Novak. Now Alfred Hitchcock is giving some wardrobe advice, a pointer to Kim Novak in a robe. Is this the greatest film of all time? There are people who are now saying that this is eclipsing Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane, because of its cinematic and storytelling innovations at the time, is considered the greatest movie ever made. Most film scholars and students will say that if you ask which is considered the greatest movie ever made. But Vertigo is in spite of some of the logical flaws in the script, Vertigo is creeping up on Citizen Kane. The greatest of all time poll conducted by the BFI, British Film Institute's Sight and Sound magazine, it was #1 10 years ago, and they do it every 10 years. So probably won last year. 2012, Vertigo bumped Orson Welles' Citizen Kane As far as the British Film Institute was concerned, bumped him out of first place. It is a terrific film, and part of it is due to the music, which we'll talk about in a little while. Okay, so another theme, common theme in the Alfred Hitchcock films is being on the run. A man on the run from the good guys, the bad guys, and sometimes both. In North by Northwest, you have Cary Grant playing a advertising executive, Roger Thornhill, who is mistaken for some sort of spy or secret agent, and he has men following him, trying to kill him. And he believes that the character played by Eva Marie Saint, I can't remember the character's name, Eva Marie Saint is trying to help him out, and turns out, of course, as very often in Alfred Hitchcock's films, the twist is that she's working for the very people he's running away from. All right. And you often find themselves, his characters, often male characters, of course, often find himself involved with this mysterious, icy blonde female character. You will notice that almost invariably Alfred Hitchcock's female leads are blondes, and often the icy, kind of aloof, kind of cool, kind of blonde, as was Tippi Hedren and some of the others. Blondes make the best victims, he said. They're like virgin snow that shows up the bloody footprints. I just find that quote fascinating. All right, so Alfred Hitchcock was unafraid to put sex, implied sex, and passion on the screen. You recall that this was toward the end of the production code. There was censorship, as you probably know, from the 1930s, 40s into the 50s. Movies were heavily censored. There was an organization called the Motion Picture Production Code of America that reviewed scripts before the movies were made, or if the movie's already made, reviewed the movie and would say, no, you've got to take this out. Too much skin, too much violence, too much sex, too much irreverent religious irreverence, etc. This body was very strict, and so when you watch movies of 30s, 40s, and 50s, early 50s, you might wonder why these movies are so squeaky clean. Why does a husband and wife sleep in separate beds? That's because the production code wanted no suggestion of sex or sexual activity on screen, and Alfred Hitchcock pushed the envelope, and he would put female characters on the screen who had strong sexual desires, and one had a promiscuous sexual past that's notorious. He was not afraid to do it. In fact, there was a rule. The production code had a rule that you could not kiss for more than 3 seconds. This is how bizarre, how specific and bizarre the production code was. You could not kiss for more than 3 seconds. So what Alfred Hitchcock did to get around that is he had them kiss for 3 seconds, disengage for 3 seconds, kiss again for 3 seconds, disengage for 3 seconds, for a total of 2.5 minutes. So he got around the rule by following the rule to the letter of the law. 3 seconds, you could kiss for more than 3 seconds. He'd take a break and start again. And that's how he got this huge, long scene of the characters kissing. That was Alfred Hitchcock. He would find a way to do what he wanted to do. Many of his films have plots, thrilling plots that have violence, they have murder, crime, as well as sex, and often the surprise twist at the end, which of course is the major feature of Psycho. There are lots of surprises in that film, including the fact that the character who appears to be the protagonist of the film doesn't survive very long. All right. His films also borrowed themes from psychoanalysis. As I said before, I think Vertigo is a very rich film because it's very psychologically sound. You have a man who saw, I don't want to get too much into the plot because you might want to see it again. You should if you haven't. He's seen something awful happen and they put him into a mental, I don't know what my wife would know, she's a psychotherapist, a state in which he no longer relates to the world going on around him. And so he would use psychological reality in his films. Now, when his films are growing, they've always been popular, always been seen as success, as outstanding. But every year, the National Film Registry since 1988, 1989, I guess it is, has been picking 25 films a year for preservation. That means a film is selected. It's selected by a combination of the popular people. You can actually go on the National Film Registry's website in the Library of Congress and say, I think this movie ought to be preserved. This is a great movie. So you get input from movie fans, and also input from the board itself, and they select 25 films every year for preservation, meaning that this film is going to exist as long as people are watching movies. You know that the old film on a reel deteriorates. And so many of Charlie Chaplin's films were lost because they weren't accurately preserved. Georges Méliès, the French director who was featured in the movie Hugo, he made 500 films, 500 short films, and only 200 survived because the films didn't really hold up very well. So the National Film Registry is saying that we're taking these films and we're going to preserve them. We're going to preserve them in whatever medium they need to, DVD or whatever, but these films will always be available to people who want to watch films because they are culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. And 9 of his films so far have been selected. Vertigo was the first, Shadow of a Doubt, Psycho, North by Northwest, Rear Window, Notorious, The Birds, Rebecca, and Strangers on the Train. That Strangers on the Train was one of the early movies, but in 2021, they got enough input and votes for that particular film. So his work, and this, when you look at a list like this, you say, well, so what? You have to put it in perspective. How many thousands of films are made every year? How many thousands are made in this country and in other parts of the world? How many thousands of films are made? So to take 25, which may not sound like a particularly impressive number, 25 is a lot maybe, but when you consider how many movies are made, it is a great honor to have your film preserved. The MacGuffin, the idea of a MacGuffin. It's a cute idea. A MacGuffin is a plot device in films, especially thriller kinds of films, chase films, mysteries, suspense films. A MacGuffin is an item that everybody wants. It's some object or a goal that everybody's after. Usually the protagonist and others are desperately after, want to get, but it's never really clearly explained what it is. Little or no explanation. So one example, for instance, and Alfred Hitchcock, by the way, is credited with inventing the concept of the MacGuffin, but he didn't really. It pre-existed his work, but he certainly popularized it. So in Hitchcock's 39 Steps, one of his early films, the plot involves a mysterious set of military secrets. You never know what the military secrets are, why they're all so important, but everybody wants to get their hands on it. That's a MacGuffin. Everybody's chasing it. And it isn't until the end that you get some idea of what this is all about. Another one in North by Northwest, you recall that if you've seen it in your film, you recall that there's a statuette. You can see it in James Mason's arms, a statuette. And in that statuette is microfilm. So this is what it's all about. Everybody's out to get this microfilm. He plays an enemy agent, and he's trying to take this microfilm out of the country. And you've got the US agents there, and along with Cary Grant trying to stop him. You don't know what it's never said what's on the microphone, why it's important. It's the MacGuffin. It's just something, it's a device. Everybody wants it. Everybody's takes desperate measures to get it, but there isn't really any great explanation as to what it is. You might recall in The Maltese Falcon. It's not a Hitchcock film, but it's the same idea. The Maltese Falcon starring Humphrey Bogart. Everybody's out to get the Maltese Falcon. They're willing to kill to get it, get their hands on it. It's described as being very valuable, but that's about it. That's about it. And that's another example of a MacGuffin, something that everybody wants with little or no explanation or significance given. Bernard Herrmann. It's hard to imagine the Alfred Hitchcock films without the music of Bernard. He didn't do all the films, but he did many of the important ones. Without the music of Bernard Herrmann, American composer who was known for his movie music. And he's particularly, he made his fame comes from his collaborations with Alfred Hitchcock, who was a taskmaster, apparently. All right, so some of the films that Bernard Herrmann scored was Psycho, and that eerie, screechy music that we'll never forget was part of the score. North by Northwest, The Man Who Knew Too Much, and Vertigo. Gives you the creeps just listening to the music. Creeps in a good way. I mean, it's genius music. That idea going round and around and around just for your music. I think it's fair to say that a lot of the success of the movie Vertigo came from that music. And he also composed for others. He worked with Orson Welles. He composed the music for Citizen Kane. He did the music for that great science fiction movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, starring Michael Rene, The Ghost of Mrs. Muir, Cape Fear, Taxi Driver. He did a number of very well-known films. He was maybe the John Williams of that earlier generation. All right, here's a list, and you probably won't be able to read them, but here's a list of the 60 films that are in Alfred Hitchcock's portfolio. About 55 of them are feature films. There are another 4 or 5 that really are short. A couple of them are shorts. Let's see, there are a couple that are here, Bon Voyage and this Adventure Malgache. I don't know how that says French. These are 2 short films made in French as propaganda pieces during World War II. So they hardly count in terms of his artistic resume. So you have about 60 films here, minus about 5 or so shorts. And this is his body of work. Everything from Always Tell Your Wife, as we said, and The Pleasure Garden up front, and The Lodger, over it's down to The Birds and Psycho, and later in his career, and what else? North by Northwest and Family Plot was the last one that he completed. Hitchcock worked with a number of great stars and Hollywood stars of his day. And let's take a quick look at some of who they were. Cary Grant, of course. He was in Suspicion. Oops, I just lost something here. Give me a second. Something just went wrong. Let me fix that. Why won't you fix? There we go. Okay, sorry. Suspicion with Joan Fontaine in a role that she won an Academy Award for. Notorious with Ingrid Bergman. These are some of the stars that Cary Grant worked with. To Catch a Thief with Grace Kelly, and James Stewart. James Stewart was another star who made multiple movies with Alfred Hitchcock. Doris Day and the Second Man Who Knew Too Much. Vertigo. You had Kim Novak. He was playing with Kim Novak, and Grace Kelly in Rear Window. Ingrid Bergman made a number of films with Alfred Hitchcock. One called Notorious. The other is Spellbound with Gregory Peck. Under Capricorn, one of his early films with Joseph Cotton. And Grace Kelly made a number of films. To Catch a Thief. Let me slow down a little bit. Just being conscious of the time. To Catch a Thief and Rear Window. And you have Alfred Hitchcock, a younger Alfred Hitchcock overseeing. And that's set. That's set, the Rear Window set, where you see the James Stewart character is able to use his binoculars or his camera to look into the windows of his neighbors. That's a set. That is not a real location or anything. That was built for the film. Kim Novak in Vertigo. Gregory Peck was another star to work multiple films. He was in Spellbound, where he plays this amnesic, whatever, person with amnesia, doctor. And a film called The Paradigm Case, which is really a courtroom film. And it's about a woman who, a lawyer, who falls in love with his client, a woman accused of multiple murders. Hitchcock, is he teary or sneezy? Tippi Hedren Tippi Hedren worked in a couple of films with Alfred Hitchcock, The Birds, and Marnie with Sean Connery. Now, Hitchcock, the perfectionist, pointing out some flaw, something on Tippi Hedren's leg. Now, Tippi Hedren, in her memoir, Tippi, a memoir, she speaks of a taxi ride, and it's kind of a sad situation. Taxi ride in which it was just as we had arrived at the hotel, and all of a sudden he comes at me like he wanted to kiss me. And it was an unpleasant situation and very embarrassing. And there were about 3 more of those incidents. So she tells the story, and there was a movie made, which we'll talk about in a little while, that sort of dramatized some of that struggle, some of those situations. Now, he became famous for a number of reasons. One is are these cameo appearances, which we'll look at in a minute, cameo appearances that he made in a number of his films. Also his TV program, maybe it was his TV program that brought him to the awareness. How many directors, we know directors by name, we may have some favorite directors, but how many directors are known by pretty much everybody who knows movies? That's the kind of director Alfred Hitchcock was. And same thing, I think, with Spielberg. Anybody who knows movies knows Steven. You could hardly ask a person who knows movies who is Steven Spielberg, and them not know who he is. So with his cameo appearances, interviews, films, his TV program, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, he became famous. He became a celebrity. He even had his own magazine, Alfred Hitchcock Magazine. He didn't write the stories, but his name was on the magazine. He became a cultural icon. You can see that that little line drawing that became his symbol. In fact, he did that. He did the line drawing himself. Okay, so you know you're on top. You know you've made it to the pinnacle of your career when you have an action figure. When you have an action figure dedicated to you. I don't know what the idea of this action figure was, but there was. If you could get your hands on one of these, it would be a huge collector's item. The Master of Suspense Alfred Hitchcock action figure. All right, now let's take a quick look. Go through these very quickly. Some of his cameo roles. You know that he would appear briefly. Toward the beginning of his films, he'd make a quick appearance, and most of the time, once you knew that, you would watch at the beginning of the film to see where he popped up. In the movie Blackmail, 1929, you see him there. Let's see if I can do this again. Here we go. Okay, you see him there, sitting on the in the seat on the subway. For a correspondent, he's passing the lead actor, Rebecca. He's waiting to use the phone booth. A shadow of a doubt, you can see the back of his head on the train. And many of his films incorporate train rides, scenes that take place in trains. It's a common theme there. Lifeboat. 8 people in a lifeboat. How could he make a cameo appearance? How could he make a cameo appearance in a lifeboat? Very clever. He is in the newspaper ad, and that in the newspaper that William Bendix's character is reading. A weight loss ad. Here's the heavy Alfred Hitchcock and the slimmer Alfred Hitchcock. That was a clever way to get his cameo on the lifeboat. The Paradigm Case with Gregory Peck. He's carrying a cello. Stage Fright, Jane Wyman, passing Jane Wyman on the street. Another carrying a cello again, and Strangers on the Train. Rear Window was one of the windows that the James Stewart character peeks into. He's seen in that room. This is, and To Catch a Thief, Cary Grant takes a seat in the bus and sits next to the Alfred Hitchcock. And this is probably the only cameo that draws attention to itself. Alfred Hitchcock, Cary Grant, if you've seen the film, Cary Grant sits there and then looks to his left, looks at Alfred Hitchcock, and then looks away. So that's the only time that the actual character draws attention to his appearance. Here in The Man Who Knew Too Much, the original, excuse me, 1956, and Vertigo, he walks past a building into which James Stewart goes. And then this is one of the fun ones, North by Northwest. At the end of the credits, he tries to get on the bus, and the bus door is closed in his face. Psycho, he's seen outside a window. The Birds, he's seen leaving a pet shop, and those were his dogs. And at the airport, Topaz, you see him here. Frenzy. This is the beginning of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, the probably famous music of any individual. It's called the Funeral March of the Marionette.
Good evening.
Good evening. It's called the Funeral March of the Marionette, and he had heard this theme on some early British television show, and he decided to use it for his own theme. Alfred Hitchcock Presents displayed his ironic humor. Here you see him in a cannon. Here you see him having lunch with a studio executive. And here you have him, well, you know, you can wear your heart on your sleeve. I don't know about wearing your stomach on your apron, but that's what we're seeing here, I think. And then there were a couple of movies, same year, oddly enough, made involving the life of Alfred Hitchcock. Toby Jones played Alfred Hitchcock in The Girl, and The Girl did deal with his obsession with Tippi Hedren. That was the basic idea of the film. And here is Toby Jones with the iconic shot of the bird, the raven on his shoulder from The Birds. You can judge for yourself how much he actually looks like Alfred Hitchcock. And then there's the actual shot that's being imitated. Okay, The Girl deals with Alfred Hitchcock and his obsession with Tippi Hedren, as based on a book that was written about, not by Tippi Hedren, but an author wrote a book about that. Now, in the same year, the great Anthony Hopkins, actor, also played Hitchcock in a movie called Hitchcock in 2012, and it was more about the relationship between him and his Hitchcock and his wife, his partner Alma, in their career, and it deals with the making of Psycho in 1960. If you haven't seen it, it's fun. It's fun. All right, so you can decide for yourself how much Anthony Hopkins. You certainly wouldn't recognize Anthony Hopkins, I think, but how much does he look like Alfred Hitchcock? Well, you can judge for yourself. All right, so in conclusion, I think we're doing good on time here. Psycho, the master of suspense. He did more to shape movies, the direction of movies, maybe than anybody in modern cinema, through his techniques, through his daring, pushing the envelope in terms of daring subject matter, and just technical excellence. And he certainly earned his Hollywood star, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Okay, so let me get out of this, and I'm going to turn the share off. Maria Vanessa, I'm going to stop it.